At long last, the video you've waited 2 years to see. It better be good. This album is so jarring. The tracklist is comprised of either fully formed bangers or glorified half-baked demos where clearly something is missing from the final version. Don't get me wrong, occasionally there will crop up a unique instrumental idea, but once too often the tunes themselves come off as really uninspired, which in the case of closing track M1A1 is particularly annoying given it spends its entire first minute attempting to build up a desolate and evocative instrumental atmosphere with these Mike Oldfield-esque bells, which, to give the track some credit, are nice, albeit overpowered by the fucking yelling man, but then all that builds up to is some contradictorily bravado-infused lyrics backed by some generic rock instrumental, which frankly would have been beneath Albarn even when he was in Blur, let alone here. Like, if you're gonna be lazy, at least lean one way or the other. Don't blue ball me with promise of something special and then put me to sleep, which is an attribute applicable in spades to the song Man Research. I was so ready and excited for some kind of climactic liftoff that never even arrived, and was instead taunted by those yeah vocals for 4.5 minutes, which brings me on to another issue. Running time. When your track does so little to justify even its existence on the album, at the very least don't drag it out. I'm looking at you, double bass. Even Clint Eastwood is too long in my opinion, not to mention the all too present falsetto which wears thin in no time at all. But hey ho, let's not pretend it's a shit show from start to finish. After all, these singles are killer. Tomorrow Comes Today and 19-2000 showcase that classic 2D voice we've all come to know and love right out the gate and with style. Plus, Del the Funky Homo Sapiens appearances on Clint Eastwood and Rock the House add such flair, which makes me wonder whether the void created within those solely instrumental tracks could have been filled had they utilised features the way Gorillaz would continue to do so plentifully on future albums. Honestly, my conclusion on this project and its singles pretty much mirror my theory on Blur's The Great Escape, which, if you're unfamiliar with, can be found in my Blur ranking vid, so little shameless self-plug there. To say this was a step up would be understatement of the year. There seems to be a much greater emphasis on world building this time around as opposed to purely aesthetic ideas, as it seemed was the case on album number 1, with the majority of tracks diverting, be it vocally or instrumentally, in ways that can be complete tonal 180s while simultaneously fitting like a glove, making the song so much more immersive and less structurally stiff. Take the bridge on opening track Last Living Souls, a song whose artistic intent I was damn near sure of until the arrival of those soul-awakening vocals and acoustic guitar, which had my jaw on the ground, an idiom applicable to this album overall, quite frankly. Not to mention the features on this are so well pitched and just scarce enough on the track list to where they arrive and you're just like, yes, with Dirty Harry and Feel Good Inks in particular ascending those tracks far beyond what would otherwise have been. The production is a huge step up too, where on Self-Titled a gripe of mine was the instrumental scarcity in conjunction with the bland melodies, which by the way you will hear me complain about not a single time given Albarn's melodies here are so good. El Mañana? Are you kidding me? That song is beautiful. Naturally, not every song hits, but I'm not really bothered by that because oftentimes either the production techniques or tune itself will compensate for that in one way or another. Yeah, Every Planet We Reach Is Dead overstays its welcome a little, but at least it crescendos climactically and doesn't just drone repetitively on, which right out the gate is an improvement compared to the last album. And yeah, Oh Green World's overabundance of clashing sound effects can feel a little disorientating, but at least the tune itself acts as supplementary accompaniment. And yeah, the 2 final tracks are a little daunting given they essentially abandoned the sonic soundscape built up to that point on the album, but they both slap still, so who cares? Guys, you're gonna hate me, but let's just tear this bandage off right now. I don't get this album. Don't get me wrong, it's a good album, there's no denying that, but the fact it's considered by many to be Gorillaz' best makes no sense to me. For one, this project's sonic palette remains more or less unaltered throughout its entire runtime, which I get is working toward building a world and soundscape unique to this album and this album only, but tracks that I would mark as being distinctly Demon Days, for example, may use similar production techniques, but not necessarily the same instruments and effects the whole time. Unlike Plastic Beach, where Welcome to the World of the Plastic Beach, Rhinestone Eyes, Empire Ants and Pirate Jet all pull from the same handbook, and predictably so. Not to mention this album has some cool features from artists whose work I love, but they're either underutilized or misplaced in my opinion. For instance, when I saw that Mick Jones and Paul Simonon played on the title track, I was like, oh awesome, this should be fun. So I gave it a listen, only to hear no trace of Mick nor Paul anywhere. I stuck it on again and thought to myself, if that is them playing on the intro, then I'm sorry, but this must be the easiest money either of of them have ever earned. I mean, it's atmospheric, but hardly creatively inspired. I could have come up with that. Lou Reed adds no more to some kind of nature than Damon Albarn could if he had chosen to have 2D singing on it. And Marky Smith's vocal presence is felt on Glitter Freeze, but annoyingly so given he's barely given a chance to shine before the track peters out. Less of the incessant synth and more of him certainly wouldn't have gone amiss. The biggest miss of all for me though has to be Bobby Womack on Stylo, an inclusion so bizarre and one I want so badly to love but just can't on account of the fact it's so out of place on an otherwise low-key song. This album is like the Gorillaz version of lo-fi beats to study and relax to, but I'm not going to complain about that as I feel like that's exactly what it's going for, nothing more, nothing less. And this album on first listen can read as disappointing considering Gorillaz have never really operated in this mode before, so if you're expecting the bounciness and immediacy of an album like Demon Days then you're probably going to be a little taken aback, but if you let this album immerse you in its world then you'll come to appreciate the beauty in its simplicity and staying power. Despite having literally just reviewed Plastic Beach, I feel like this LP is the only Gorillaz album up to this point that I would strongly advise you experience as an album as opposed to recommending individual songs, especially seeing as sometimes the tracks act as interludes or segues whose purpose is to ease you into the next song, and it's for that reason that I'm not going to be ranking the tracks on this one. How Damon thought this was good enough is beyond me, let alone as a comeback album. I did not think that after having heard Demon Days, Plastic Beach and The Fall that I would be reiterating points from my write-up of the Gorillaz debut album, but I'm sorry, these instrumentals are so one-note and uninspired, they wouldn't sound out of place on Kiss FM, and no onslaught of endless features is going to rescue these songs from the depths of tedium to which they sink time and time again. Even the guest vocalists sound bored. Not to mention almost every song follows the same formula, and it's not even a good formula. The repetition of the choruses on some of these tracks calls tirelessly out for a new idea or change in direction that never comes. Don't get me wrong, for the most part these tracks are so short to where it's kind of hard to react negatively to them in any major way given how fleeting they are, especially the pointless interludes. However, the anger comes more out of how many songs there are on the album that all fall more or less into the same category. Did it never occur to Damon before deciding to put 20 bloody tracks on this that Charger and She's My Collar are more or less the exact same song just with a slightly different coat of paint? Nor the fact that Sex Murder Party and Hallelujah Money's virtually non-existent melody sound as if they were made up on the spot? Don't even get me started on We Got the Power, which is as bizarre a song in general as it is an album closer. Although it does make an interesting admission, because not just anyone has the power to cobble thoughtlessly together an album of B-side quality songs, the contacts necessary in bringing said album to a contemporary audience, nor the roster of iconic characters whose faces slapped on the cover in an all-too Demon Days-esque fashion will no doubt provoke nostalgia in those who listen, albeit disappointedly. But I guess Damon has the power to do that. Maybe I set my expectations too high following the previous album, but this is another disappointment for me. To its credit, it gets off to a fun start with a run of 3 bubbly bops in the form of Humility, Trans and Hollywood, but it takes no time at all before the more downtrodden mid-tempo tracks rear their head and slow the flow of the album so severely to the point where you're just dying for something as uppity as the first 3 to pop back up, which of course never happens. The issue lies not just within the tone though, as the songwriting even appears to fall off a cliff, where on tracks like Kansas and Idaho you can distinguish between the verses and chorus neither instrumentally nor vocally, on account of how rigid and immovable the melodies throughout are, which goes for a majority of this album, leaving me wondering what the aim was here. It seems to be caught in this awkward middle ground between poppy and ambient, which strips it of almost any identity. It's like the vibes are there but the songs aren't. The instrumentals for a good 30 seconds may provoke you to nod your head, but it won't take long before the lack in dynamics and complete absence of assured vocal deliverance kills the mood for you. Guys, Song Machine is so colourful, adventurous and fun. It fills in all those gaps I criticised the previous 2 albums for. This is how you come back swinging, holy shit. My jaw was on the ground when it ended. I seriously did not think Gorillaz were ever going to be this good again, but I was proven so wrong. The features where on previous albums sounded like they had a gun to their head add so much flavour here, and sometimes unexpectedly so. Who would have thought Elton John and Six Lack would come together so harmoniously on the Pink Phantom? Or that Peter Hook's signature bass sound would add a whole other dimension to Fairies, which is a beautiful song and my favourite on the album. Or that Gorillaz could tap into the trap genre on Dead Butterflies and not only pull it off, but gloriously so. I could have bet money on the idea that a trap song by Gorillaz, especially at this stage of their career, would come away sounding cheap and tacky, but no. And that's what I love about this album. It's so chock full of surprises and curveballs, even within the songs themselves, that keep the listener engaged from start to finish. Oh, and did I mention the sounds on this album are magnificent? Every song spoils you with added layers of instrumentation at any and every opportunity, even when the song hasn't gotten boring. Bravo, Damon, you've earned my trust back. What an album. Well, that didn't take long. This album wouldn't feel out of place on a running or workout playlist, but certainly does in amongst Gorillaz' back catalogue. And like that sort of music, it's very instant and immediately gratifying, but ultimately leaves no lasting impression. It's good for the moment, but as soon as that moment passes, so too does your enjoyment of the music. But however lacking in the variety of format and structure this album can feel, its features do take it up a notch, such that one can only wonder how much worse off this album would be without them. Tame Impala and Booty Brown do a fine job on New Gold, to such an extent that Damon's contributions actually pale in comparison and only exist to serve the function of an arbitrary 2D vocal. Oil and Tormentor are fun too, but similarly owe a lot to their respective guest vocalists, who really raised the bar of what had been set by the bare bones of both of these songs. On the whole, this album is fine, but could easily have been released under a different name, and I doubt anyone would notice anything uniquely Gorillaz-esque about it. And now for the ranking, coming at you in 3, 2, 1, go. Well, thank you for watching everyone. Do feel free to leave a comment letting me know what you thought of this video as well as your own Gorillaz rankings. I'm genuinely interested to hear what they are. Tune in next time for Arctic Monkeys.